Welcome, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I think I'm still juggling with Zoom links. So why don't we do this? We can get started right on time today to finish the list of talks. And then this would be, I'm hoping we'll have lots of time for just an open-ended discussion on two main agenda items. One would be focused on very specifically on moving projects forward, the kinds of resources and the logistics around specifically on the projects themselves. And then the second aspect of it would also be is making sure we're keeping our communication channels up and running as well. So we'll get to those logistics in a bit. Let's get started with the list of people. We will still stick to the same time pressure that everybody else was put on. So although we have more time today and less number of talks to go through, we'll still do the 5 minute, maybe a minute or so for comments. I guess Tyler just shared the list.
Yeah, so first up is going to be the oral cancer team.
Is it change or, okay, I guess everybody has that. Yeah, let's start with the cancer. Yeah. Tanvi, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Not really. I think it's very, very quiet.
Tanvi, are you muted or? So we can see your slides, but yeah, Tanvi, your microphone is on, but we don't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there's something very faint in the background. Do you want to remove your headphones or just the normal things we do to debug Zoom?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's extremely faint.
Okay.
Oh, can you test now? Tanvi, can you try testing now?
Hello?
Yeah, it's still very faint.
Can you give me
perfect.
a second?
Oh,
Perfect.
It's getting louder now.
It's working now. Oh.
Whatever you did when you said, give me a second, if you moved closer to your computer or something, that worked.
Okay, so is it good now?
It's still very faint, but what you did a second ago was actually perfect. We don't know what that was. Yes, I think. Yeah, usually the more number of devices connected, the more possibilities of failures. So yeah, I think, can you try now?
Yes, I'm trying. Hello?
Perfect, it's working, it's working. Don't do anything. We can get started.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm presenting from the oral cancer team and talking about the problem. Oral cancer is one of the most common cancers globally that we discussed before as well. Most oral cancers are related to tobacco use, but now there has been reported infection by human papilloma virus and also due to alcohol use. The biggest hurdle is that the majority of population is not aware of the importance of oral hygiene and the side effects of smokeless tobacco mainly, and that can be attributed to lower literacy rates in low and middle income countries. Most oral cancer deaths could be prevented if detected early. So our main area of focus that we'll try to work on will involve only rural populations at first in different areas. And this is because of some really interesting things that we could find in research papers. that I like to share now. A study done in rural, semi-urban, and urban areas revealed that the prevalence rates of oral cancers were maximum in rural areas when compared to semi-urban and urban areas. And according to a global tobacco survey in India, the mean age for initiation of tobacco was recorded to be 17.2 plus minus 8.7 years. So, which means it gives us an idea that people usually, or I should say adolescents or youth, that they usually start having tobacco at this age, and therefore screening camps will be useful for greater than 18 years, because it is not about only detection, which they may develop later, but it's about awareness and education sessions that might we'll have them it will precede the screening camps, so they can prove to be useful for the young populations. Now consider screening in people who are reporting usage of tobacco, like high risk screening is more beneficial. And one of our team members based in Puerto Rico, we checked the trends of oral cancer in that specific region, and it revealed that it has the highest reported age adjusted oral and pharyngeal cancer. So we only got to know this because we have one of our team members from there. This picture is actually from one of the patients I had in my dental school, and it is very astonishing that he was not old. He was around 30 years, and this is a lesion which is malignant. It is squamous papilloma. And I asked him that how many times have you visited a dentist before, and he said not even a single time. So this explains how serious the problem is. And now these are some lesions, some pictures I have attached for everyone to look at how pre-malignant lesions look like, but they don't seem really dangerous. So the first thing before making any device, I think the first step would be creating awareness. So from now on, my teammate Rahul would take it further.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So after going through the statistics and studying few research papers, we actually came to a conclusion that oral cancer can be prevented if detected early in stage 1 or stage 2. So before jumping into any kind of creating any scanning device or biomarker detection tool, we thought of creating something to spread awareness, especially in especially to people living in rural areas. So what we thought is to create an awareness guidebook kit, which will actually provide, which will actually contain pictures of different types of oral cancer and also types of lesions, oral cancer lesions. So this awareness guidebook kit will be made available in native languages, so different community group people can have access to it. And also this book will not contain much text, because as we know that visuals and pictures grab more attention than text. So what we thought is we'll keep more pictures and less of text. And also this guidebook kit will contain a logbook. Logbook will contain all the numbers of the doctors, medical students, dentists, and also clinicians who want to help us for this cause. Next slide. So initially, as a solution, what we thought was to create a digital scanning device. So for that, we have actually two prototypes. The one is a digital scanning device connected to a smartphone. So the smartphone will have a pre-installed software. The software will actually scan the mouth, and also it will provide the images on the smartphone screen. The other prototype which we just actually thought of was to create a scanning device with a module. So the module will have two kinds of light. One is white light and the other is the fluorescence light. So the fluorescence light and white light combined will create high resolution images inside the mouth. So we are not sure that whether this will work, and we have a long way to go. So this is our team. We have four of them. And also to make this project more successful, we need more members to join our team. And we are open to suggestions and ideas from other people. Thank you.
So that's fantastic. I mean, I think one comment that I'll just make is I just linked the OSCAN and the prior work that we have done on the scanning side. And I think, again, going back to saying where the root of the problem is, rather than just jumping to solutions, is one reminder that we get every single time when we're thinking about these problems. There's a comment that I'm going to make at the very end. At the end of the class, when we're having a discussion, many of you are graphic designers and visual people, and that resource is so incredibly important for projects. And so I think one thing we will try to do is also divide up in terms of just if some of you are providing certain kinds of help and resources to other teams, and especially that it might already be like, I was looking at the logo for Made, for example, last weekend and realizing, wait a second, she could help in so many teams directly. Let's jump to next talk is going to be on Soil Lab.
I'm going to start
Brenda,
sharing my screen.
Yes. And then the people who are not talking, if they can mute, that way we don't have to handle the background noise.
Can you all see it?
It's loading.
Yep, we see it now.
Am I audible?
Yes. Take it away, Brenda, Siddhant.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, hello everyone, we're Soil Lab. And I will start this presentation saying that this is our team. I really want to start this presentation saying that soil health matters. And it really is about particularly for culture, because without soil, it's impossible to grow anything. The main problem is that health, it's not only one parameter. Sometimes when you think about it, you can say like, oh, my organic matter level in the soil is perfect, but then you look and have like really high levels of aluminum or low pH, and this can influence the way crops grow.
Brenda, your slides are not changing. So I don't know if you want the first slide itself or you want to be in present mode. We're still seeing if you go all the way to the right, next to the share button, there is present.
Okay.
Oh. I think it's always best whenever you share, just share your whole screen. Okay, perfect. And you can go.
Okay, okay, perfect. So what I was saying, when we think about soil, we cannot only think about one parameter. We have to think about many things that are interacting with each other. They can be like meteorological variables, soil chemical, physical, biological variables. It depends on the plant you're trying to grow. So there are many things that we have. And when it comes to farmers, sometimes they don't really have all this information. They know what they have to grow because someone told them. They have a general idea of, but sometimes they don't really know what their soils need. And yes, it's true that they can like I get to read, right? Like you see, okay, what do I do with all of this? Important for farmers that are in remote.
Brenda, your audio is going in and out a little bit.
Oh no.
Okay, now it's good. Let's try again.
Yes, so I'm just going to go slide. And I want to say that soil health is really important, but it's not for many farms. And it can be because they are in remote and they don't have access to a lab to take the soil. It's also really expensive. Like a sample can cost $1,000, and it can be very difficult to interpret. So we are going to target all of these things with our. And now Sidan is gonna talk to you a little bit more about all of this.
Yeah, hi there. So Brenda already told that why soil analysis is important. Now I'd like to spend a couple of minutes in telling you what nutrients need to be detected and how do we plan to detect them in the first place. So as you can see, there are two parts of the problem, the primary analysis and the secondary analysis. The primary analysis deals with what are the major or the important parameters which we need to find out. And that's the first primary ingredient being the pH, because the pH will give you a rough idea of what to plant and what time of the year should you plant which crops. So pH is the first parameter, and NPK. So as all of us are well familiar that the cost of the nitrogen, phosphorus, as well as the potassium fertilizer is the maximum. So we are trying to detect the nitrogen, phosphorus, as well as the potassium nutrients present in the soil. Along with, we are targeting the organic matter and the metal content, because metal content is one of the most key ingredient, because it will tell you whether the crops grown in your backyard are toxic or not. So next slide, Brenda. The next slide, please. Yes. So in this slide, we'll be talking about what frugal methods did we find in the literature, and and in the later slides, we'll be comparing them. So the first method is essentially the colorimetric device. It's essentially a lab-on-chip device where we have the sample. As you can see in the topmost part, we have a sample which is injected on a piece of paper, and we have samples at different spots, and the samples do have a colorimetric change based on the nutrient which is detected by a smartphone, and which gives us a rough idea of what the nutrients are present. There is also the second idea of capillary electrophoresis, which essentially is we first, you can see in the second image over here in the center part. So we first inject the sample, and then we inject the buffer solution, and we provide a polarity difference between the top and the bottom part of the sample. And due to the polarity difference, the different ions of different polarity as well as mass do separate out. As you can see in the last image, the blue and the turquoise color ions are essentially separated out. So they have different charges. So more the charge, faster will be the travel in the electrophoretic chamber. And the last is the sensor-based measurement. So essentially here in capillary electrophoresis, we have a single electrode, essentially the yellow part, which measures the potential difference across. And but in case of a sensory-based measurements, we have different electrodes. As you can see, the soil sample is at the bottom, and we have different electrodes in order to measure ion-specific electrodes in order to measure the different ions, and we also have the pH and humidity sensor. So we know what methods are present in the literature, but how do we finalize on what method to choose? So based on our initial meeting with Manu Prakash sir, we essentially plan to do a cost sensitivity analysis where we plan to compare the cost and sensitivity of each method and try to come up with the final method of our approach. So as you can see, at one end of the spectrum is the conventional lab-based testing, which is of $1,000 of cost, and we have a sensitivity of 0.01 micrograms per liter. But it is not practical or feasible for a farmer in order to spend such a huge amount of money in order to get the nutrient levels, because he just wants a classification of the nutrient level in low, medium, or high. So essentially, the feasible design space will be the one shown in green, where we will plan to have a hybrid of colorimetric as well as electrophoresis analysis. So you can see the feasible design space has a lower cost as well as sensitivity. As we know the feasible design space, it's also worthwhile to look into the design trade-off of each and every method. So just you can look in the image on the right hand side, you see that the electrophoretic data is essentially the voltage peak. So we have some electrodes, and when the ions are passing through the electrodes, we'll have essentially a voltage peak. But this data is very difficult in order to understand for a layman or an agricultural farmer. So we need to have some sort of translation in order to make those data interpretation easy, which is one of the main drawbacks of capillary electrophoresis. And secondly, Brent, I can just change there. Yeah. And in second, as you can see, colorimetric analysis, which are commercially available paper strips, only give a low resolution. That is low, medium, and high. So can we increase the resolution of paper-based microfluidic device and also use capillary electrophoresis, which will essentially give a universal method of ion detection? So that is what we are looking into. The next slide. So the entire process of how it will work is we'll first focus on soil collection, the pre-processing part. How do we collect it, from where do we collect it, and how do we sample it? Next, we'll move to the extraction and the analytic detection part. The last part will be result interpretation. But this is the front end part of the project. The back end part will be, can you just, yeah, the backend part will be how do we translate those results in order to make it easily decipherable to all the people. So they need to understand which crop is best suited for the soil and which fertilizer to use. So at last, we'd like to conclude by the next slide, please.
Yeah, so as a conclusion, so we've been methods, and it's important to consider the trade-offs between resolution and cost. So we said that we were going to try a hybrid approach of time with a good resolution. And we're still thinking and just like trying to approach all of this. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much.
And we are also stuck in various parts of fabrication of the electrophoretic chamber. And so any input from your side, so and any mentor for our project will be greatly useful. We also like to thank Tyler and Monica in order to give us this opportunity. So we have two videos. We'll just make it quick, of the microfluidic device and the electrodes that we try to build. Our friend Subhashis and I try to do that. So Brenda, if you can open that.
Yeah, and Siddhant, what I'm going to do is we're running out of time. So the comment is, since many folks are utilizing very common frameworks to build many projects, what we're going to put together is just a simple resource repository for everybody to be able to utilize the same sets of resources, but of course, apply them in a very broad number of ways. I think I'm starting to see people stuck in common places, and this is very valuable to see because eventually then we know what we need to support very specifically. So I'll make a comment about that, which is, again, the goal is to see commonalities and have those common platforms be available for people to then implement. Okay, let's jump to the next talk.
Next is global epilepsy.
Alrighty.
And then people who are not talking, if they could mute themselves. I'm hearing a little bit of a background. Tyler, I don't know if you can see where that's, okay, it's gone now. Yeah.
Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, thanks everyone. So I'm presenting on behalf of our group, Seizure Care, which is a fun pun, but for global epilepsy care. So I'll start with some background information about epilepsy and what we've learned. Epilepsy is one of the most common neurological conditions in the world, and it is defined by recurrent seizures that could happen and manifest in very different ways. I think most of us are used to understanding seizure as a convulsive seizure, so you can think of it like that as well. And it affects people, all across the globe at all demographics. There aren't very many particular determinants for epilepsy. It is quite ubiquitous. notably, around the world, in places in low and middle income countries, we see a huge discrepancy in the prevalence of epilepsy. And the World Health Organization estimates that approximately 80% of all epilepsy is contained in low and middle income countries. There are some more up-to-date, I think, meta-analyses that we've looked at in the literature that have this figure closer to 60% than 80%. But regardless, the problem here is that in these areas without access to high-end care, there is a lack of treatment availability and treatment options for people. And importantly, a lot of areas where medical expertise is not as common, there can be quite a lot of misinformation and maybe cultural beliefs that get in the way of a person either coming forward with their disease or their condition, or being stigmatized in a way that prevents them from seeking help. A really great review paper that talks about the epilepsy treatment gap in sub-Saharan Africa identified these 5 different causes of the treatment gap that we see. And I'm not going to go over all of them. You guys can read them here, but there are a ton of issues. And I think one of the things that we learned as a group as we were tackling this issue was that it is incredibly complex, and that the solution, the problem space is so diverse, and that makes us have a really diverse solution space as well. And so our overall goal, no matter what, is how do we close this treatment gap? How do we rectify those problems that I aforementioned? And like I mentioned, we've kind of came across multiple different solutions. And in fact, the first one that I think jumped out to all of us was that there needs to be an increased awareness and stigma, anti-stigma campaign. And this requires immense cultural competency. It is completely specific to different areas and the different communities that are affected by epilepsy. And I do think that all of us in our group are really enthusiastic about pursuing this further. But since our classes, and since we are all scientists and our classes focused on science, we decided to table that question, which I think intersects with technological solutions as well, but it, I think requires a different kind of focus for later. And instead, we tried to focus on technological approaches to solve this problem, which are bolded in gold. And those are, first identifying what are the key hurdles in acquiring treatment and a diagnosis for epilepsy in low and middle income countries. And 2, is there a technological approach that rectifies those key hurdles? So first, I think the first goal that our group has, and that is continuously still ongoing because this is a really challenging problem to get a grasp of, is what is the treatment timeline? And on the left, you see an acute timeline that was reproduced by a company that is making technology to solve, making better diagnostic technology for EEG. And what this is an acute timeline. This is like if a person is in a high income country and they notice they have a seizure, what is the timeline for them to get care? And what we realize is, one, this it can be a ton of time, and even in well-developed areas, there's a lot of ambiguity in what and how to diagnose epilepsy and get patients the care they need. And 2, it kind of gives us a framework to how to think about the epilepsy treatment gap in low and middle income countries. And so one of our goals that we're trying to build, what we're trying to do is build contextual and longer scale timelines that talk about not the acute treatment, but the overall access. How many days does it take for somebody to understand that they have a seizure? How many days does it take to contact a healthcare official, healthcare volunteer? Depends on the type of community, what kind of resources would be available. And basically what we are trying to elucidate is what is the minimum medical information that is needed to get patients the treatment that they need. And by kind of understanding that minimum amount of medical information, can we then design ways to acquire that information quickly and effectively? And kind of, at an addendum, after a diagnosis, where are the short terms of long-term community care? So what we're talking about is a patient who maybe has not been diagnosed with epilepsy, needs drugs, but after they have even received a diagnosis, where are the shortcomings in their community to help them continue taking their medicine or support them through their condition, even after they see their healthcare community? And just as a further kind of to drive this point further, if this is a graphic that was produced by the Epilepsy Foundation, which is an awesome nonprofit organization that's mainly focused on epilepsy in North America, but they provide so many resources about kind of how diagnosis is triaged in the medical system. And this is thinking about the American healthcare system. So high income country, access should be high. Each arrow in this flowchart represents a necessary acquisition of medical information. And the problem is every single one of these steps, the kind of medical information that you need can be different, right? It's not just understanding maybe a brain scan. There may be multiple different scans at each one of these arrows that need to be given to a neurologist or specialist. Or maybe earlier on, it's a primary care physician, but later on, it has to be a specialist to be able to make a judgment call. And it's incredibly challenging, right? To think that even in places with systems that have access to all these resources, that there still needs to be so much nuance in this conversation. It makes the challenge for bridging the gap between high-income countries and low and middle-income countries really, really hard. But that is what we are still trying to do. And so kind of thinking about the technological approaches, like for example, at all those arrows, I mentioned that there need to be different medical tests. Could we find ways to make those tests cheaper and easier to do? And one of the first things we wanted to investigate was looking at what is the current landscape of technology for non-invasive brain imaging, and the most popular form for diagnosing epilepsy is something called an electroencephalogram, which is an EEG. And what you have here is what one of our group members, Ceci, produced a kind of a literature search and a graph that correlates the number of channels, which is sort of a proxy for how rich this information could be for a medical professional, to price. And you can see that it's expensive. It gets pretty expensive pretty quickly. It's almost linear, like very linear. And on the left are some examples of kind of low footprint devices that we could investigate. Our bottom line here is that we are thinking, could we utilize some of these low footprint devices, or perhaps even make our own that could provide the benefits that those devices provide at a lower cost, and then utilize other kinds of data analysis techniques or things like telemedicine to help bridge the gap. So one of the ideas that we're playing around with is, could we utilize some cloud-based AI, some machine learning techniques to be able to make or help a doctor make a diagnosis faster? And importantly, one of the biggest gaps here, it's not that the data necessarily needs to be classified very quickly. So even the algorithm is kind of up in the air. What might be more important is, can we get this data in the hands of a neurologist where there isn't one? And that is, I think, maybe one of the biggest gaps that we can begin to fill. Can we get neurological information that could be medically relevant to the hands of a doctor that really needs it? And so this idea of telemedicine, or looping in neurologists that are out of country, out of state, to be able to analyze easy to administer exams by non-specialists in the populations that need it. This could be a route that we're exploring. I wanted to introduce our team at this point. It's a cool team of 5 of us. I think we've had a lot of fun discussing and sharing kind of our progress. If I want to, our Notion page is linked here in the corner as well. I do want to mention maybe one last thing before we break and answer questions or move on to the next group, which is, I think one of the things that we really need is connection to the healthcare providers. And I think that is something that has been a real struggle. I'm at Stanford, and I haven't gotten a hold of a single neurologist yet, not without trying, right? And I believe things are very, very busy for epileptologists and neurologists in the area, but being able to have more firsthand perspective on what it takes for a neurologist to make a diagnosis is the number one question that we have right now, because then that guides our design principles, and that guides the rest of this kind of entire project. So that gap is certainly what we're missing right now. I think once we gain a better understanding there, we'll be able to make a lot more strides in kind of rectifying this gap and prototyping some hopefully impactful technology. So that is everything. Thank you, everyone.
That's awesome, Ajay. And I think we will discuss this a little bit more on, because now you have all refined so clearly the sets of needs, it becomes much easier to actually reach out, because there is a very finite space of asks that we have for folks in that space. So I think, yeah, that's something. And since a significant portion of group is from the medical community in India, I think AIMS and a couple of places to start there would be a fantastic. There's a program Stanford has with AIMS. So I'll follow up on that. Let's transition to the next team, which is
next up is bioseismic.
Mouse meters. It's also going for the top names for the teams.
Yeah, can you see
Yes,
the
Kabir,
screen?
you're on.
Yeah, looks great.
Yeah, hi. We are the Health Hathi March Bioseismic team. Our project was inspired by a requirement posted by Kishore Panaganti. Elephants
Oh,
raid
Subir,
crops.
before you go on, there is a black
Yeah.
square on the left side of your screen, which is taking away all the incredible graphics. Do you want to unshare and share again? Oh, we're
Is
back.
it clear?
It's all good. Yes,
And is it
it's good now. Oh,
okay?
oh, it came back.
Okay.
Can
All
you
right.
try? Is there
Yeah,
another screen that's on
they were
top?
my screen
Okay.
notes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is we got a requirement from Kishore Panagandhi that there are many elephant raids that happen in southern India. And these elephants actually enjoy the crops produced by farmers. And each of these raids are actually very costly to the farmers because they destroy the whole field. So because farmers cannot afford electric fences, so they often have to patrol at the night, and that causes a lot of stress to the farmers. So the idea was, can we make some detector that can detect the presence of elephants from far, like say 2 or 3 kilometers, so that the farmers need not unnecessarily patrol the village borders. So we thought we could use a small computer mouse to do our job. And the way we want to do is have a mechanical sensor that will amplify ground waves, and an optical mouse that will interface it, and a computer that connects with that optical mouse for further digitization and analysis. So why a mouse? Because this is a anyway, so this is the device which we have built.
Can you talk through while we're not hearing the audio, so you can talk through what people are looking at?
Okay, so I think I'll have to mute this. So it's a PVC structure that has mouse on the left side and a blade and a plastic scale which has been suspended by the blade on one side, and it's free on the other side. So it kind of forms a cantilever. And on the other side, on the right hand side, is a laser pointer, and that laser pointer actually illuminates the mouse sensor directly. Now the cantilever has a small piece of plastic CD which has been polished and roughened, and so the laser actually goes through that rough piece of plastic, and that kind of creates speckle patterns on the mouse sensor. And when the cantilever vibrates, because it is in such a free position, the mouse actually detects the movement. So this is like it's kind of a layman or a garden gate seismometer. So that's what we have built. It has a small inertial weight, and it has a the thing that is we have done is we have added a fold scope lens to it, so that we have a very amplified view of the speckles pattern, and so that gives us quite a nice sensitivity. So if you can't hear the video, I'll just go to the next slide, right? Okay. So this is another slide where I'm testing the thing, but I don't think you will be able to hear the video, the audio also.
You should
So,
just narrate it.
okay, so I'm standing at the very end of the video on the left, and I'm trying to stomp my foot like an elephant would do. And we see the spikes going up every time I stomp on it. So this is around, say, 80, I don't know how many feet this is. So that's our way of testing. We have also, oops, sorry. No, that's one. Yeah. So what we are doing is we are capturing all these mouse movements in X and Y coordinates using a Python script. And we are plotting spectrograms and trying to see if we can capture sound low frequency vibrations from different noise sources currently in our vicinity. We would like to test it with elephants, but we are very far away from actually verifying the whole chain of process. So all this is based on old experiments that we have been doing from the day this class started. We have been opening the mouse, adding lenses to the mouse, removing the circuit, trying to see why a circuit should have this component or not, or that component. And we've been trying to cover it with different boxes to isolate it from ambient light and see its sensitivity. So a lot of things. I mean, our Discord channel is full of a lot of discussions going on around it. We also tried to think of how to use a optical lever with a liquid as a reflector for a laser beam. We tried this and then it didn't work very well. We didn't have all the patience to do the experiment properly. So that didn't work. So what's next? So what we'll do is we want to fine tune this prototype. We don't know. There are many issues in it, but we'll have to fine tune that. We want to know how far we can sense. So we think right now, I think that I can sense big vibrations in the building adjoining to my building, but I'm not very sure. We need to verify that. And once we are able to sense enough, we need to verify what if suppose there was an elephant in the building just nearby, what would it be saying? So we need to understand how to do a proper spectrogram and identify elephant rumbles from it. We would like to build a field prototype that can actually, which has the power supply and all those things packaged in a kind of a rigid box that we can test it on the field. So that's the plan. And the long-term vision is to have a network of such devices that would send the spectrogram or low frequency vibration data to a village hub. And this is where the cost comes in. A Raspberry Shake, which is a device, which is a very good device, can do this same thing, but it would cost around $300 plus, whereas our device can cost from $10 to $30. And so that's why I think we can really, we need to pursue this project. So thanks a lot. That's from my side. Thank you, Manu and Tyler, for doing this nice course. Any questions, please feel free to ask. Thanks.
That was awesome.
Yeah, so just quick set of comments and then we'll move to the next. I think one of the important bits that this highlights is, again, using a mouse as a resource. So in the Notion page, of course, this is very specifically for this project, but it opens up for anybody to use mouse for all kinds of projects. And then the second thing to also just think a little bit about here would start Kishore, if he's close enough, or anybody who's close to it. I think it's very important to get the signature, because you have to build the cantilevers that are most sensitive to the kind of wave that's traveling. Because in the field, there's going to be a lot of noise, including wind and other factors. So how do you couple it to the ground is going to be a key. It might be that you really have to anchor it into the mud. So let's catch up on the testing phase. But since Kishore might actually be in the field, it's worth sending him a device.
Yeah, that's the next plan. Thanks.
Okay, let's move to Swiftlet, and then we'll have a general discussion after this.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this great opportunity. I'm Haim, and I'll present with Getika. We are part of the team Swiftlet, and we aimed at making ultrasound low cost. So, generally speaking, ultrasound is very important and useful in many cases. It can be used to place a central line for prenatal care, which is very important, especially today. Even in fast scans, which is in trauma settings, and unfortunately, ultrasound is difficult to understand with and without training. which can take up to 2 years sometimes. Ultrasound is extremely expensive, costing usually up to $100 to $200, or between $100,000 to $20,000 and sometimes even more. And Getika will present our goals and existing products.
So we started out by trying to understand what are the existing cheap and portable ultrasound devices on the market, namely the Clarius, the Philips Lumify, and the Butterfly IQ, all of which function on different base technology. That is like from piezoelectric crystal, octal beam forming to the CMUT technology of the Butterfly IQ, which has created quite the buzz in the recent times. They all vary in their transducer and probe designs, and they have different software presets and accessory features. They all differ in the resolution of images that they produce, and they're all set at quite different price points, though significantly cheaper than the cart-based full-size ultrasound. But from the analysis of all of these products, it was quite apparent that no individual device was ideal. They all had their pros and cons. But it helped us understand what features we wanted to incorporate in our device, the Swiftlet. So the long-term goals and improvements for our Frugal ultrasound was that it should be cheap, and we wanted to keep it open source, and a good resolution was very important to us. It should be lightweight and portable, user-friendly, and hopefully you could have a singular universal probe for all the different presets, and it preferably also have it wireless. And having it Wi-Fi independent was also very important to us so that we can have a much better rural outreach, especially in developing nations in primary healthcare settings. And it should also be HIPAA compatible and protect the privacy of the patient. It should also be iOS and Android compatible. It should have a detachable battery and a fast charging and temperature auto-regulation so that the device does not heat up too quickly. So I think Chaim can continue with the short-term goals. Okay, yeah.
So what we imagined and created is a double hinge system based on 2 servo motors and 1 ultrasound element. It could be a CMUT-based technology or a piezoelectric element. There are existing ideas of moving the element laterally, thus imitating an array with a single transducer instead of many. It saves a big percent of the cost. We improved upon this idea by using another servo motor to move the transducer angularly. Thus, the same pixel in the image can be overlapped from different angles, and which we hope will improve resolution. And another benefit from this system is due to the different angles, we also hope to eliminate shadowing, which is due to one object being behind another object. So we cannot see and differentiate one from the second, and we cannot differentiate the second clearly, thus making ultrasound harder to read for professionals and even harder to train in. So we had a couple of short-term goals. First of all, we want to connect it to existing open source ultrasound project which exists, such as EcoPen and UNORIC acquisition port, which was designed by Kilo, which we contacted and helped us a lot. We then plan on experimenting and refining our software so that we may reconstruct the best image possible. We of course documented all of our process in the Notion page, and we hope to develop software which will work together with other open source systems, together with our probe, in order to drastically lower the price of ultrasound so that it will be as accessible to everybody. The team is composed of Arshi, who is trained as a bioengineer and was very beneficial to the team, and Getika, who is in her final year of med school, and so is Sajal, and me, Chaim, and undergraduate from Israel. And thank you very much for this opportunity, Professor Manu and Tyler. It was very great for us.
So, Haim, you have a minute or so even still left. Maybe could you comment on the shortfalls, or where does the biggest jump need to happen on the open source ultrasound project that we had found? The current,
yeah.
Where
So
did
currently,
it fall behind? Can you just,
Yeah, so currently there are a couple of problems. First of all, one of the problems is basically getting an FDA approval, which we don't understand, like, why is it still a problem for Ricopan?
I can
but
talk about that. If you look at Ethan's talk, that was one of the key of why it's challenging for open source projects to get FDA approval.
Yeah, we understand that. And another thing that, like, they got to a cost of about $400 to $500, which is a drastic improvement. But one of the elements that they were blocked by in decreasing the cost even more is the probe. So they were able to create a single transducer and move it laterally, but the image was really horrible, not feasible and not usable. And the probe cost about, the cheapest one we could find is $60, and it's not a good probe, and I don't think professionals actually use it. And by using this system, you can use a single transducer and maybe create a better image than what there is currently. And it can be used with CMUT, which we hope will be even for the future, as they say.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch. Next is Fur and team on Pussy Riot.
Thank you. Hi. Let me share this. Okay, can you see it?
It's loading. Yes.
Cool. So this is our team. It's called Pussy Riot. It was a tentative name, but it stuck. Well, this is our full project. You can check it on our Notion page. And the main, well, the first question that we asked ourselves was, can pregnancy tests can be 100% homemade? And the more we made research on this, we realized that the question, am I pregnant, isn't a specific linear process. So this problem is actually due to the very first statement on the design process. So mainstream drugstore solutions are not designed for all women. It only is only thought for those who can actually go to a drugstore and buy it. And this is partially due to stigmatization that drives some women to find out solutions heuristically. So they look for friends' knowledge, internet, or self-experimentation. So we realize that this uncertainty threshold isn't just at the very end of the process of being actually pregnant. It implies a lot of processes. And we thought as a team that taking those variables into account and actually put them into each and every one of those contexts actually gives us a wide range of questions that can be answered through a lot of research studies that are being currently studied at a lot of places on the world. So the question, am I pregnant, isn't, it's answered day by day by women. So women have information gaps that, if self-correctly filled, could help on diagnose at home at DIY testing. So a lot of DIY processes that we studied through this research implies that a lot of women need to know about themselves. So we made this Frugal cabbage pH tracking testing that you can look for at our Notion page for vaginal fluids, and it changes the acidity of vaginal fluids, and then you can start wondering when do you want or not get pregnant. There's also this experiment, or well, it actually got very popular during the 70s, where you injected a frog, and if the frog laid eggs on 24 hours, you got a lot of eggs. And also reagent-based testing made by one of our teammates all gave us answers to the question, am I pregnant? Or at least some cues. So we made this uncertainty mapping of all the questions that women can ask themselves in either they were protected or not when penetration happened, or if it was medically assisted procreation. And it's not a linear process. I mean, it's there's spaces of doubt, and also try to look for pre-self information, or then you have to make some decisions, then you're back to uncertainty, and then you have to make this follow-up. And all the specific questions are also in our Notion page if you want to check them specifically. But at least 23 different starting points lead to different processes of uncertainty reduction. So all of our main proposal here is to create a structured meeting point where science, self-registered, and local networks, because of current stigmatization, meet. We want to create a pretext to involve labs and research with specific women questions during this process, and being able to translate any answer back to women who at the same time will be informed about their own bodies. We want a dialogue through practice. So all of this because we couldn't actually create a global DIY pregnancy testing, because we don't know what's in everybody's kitchens, for example. So our solution spectrum actually implies this 4 big areas, which is object distribution, on diversifying the access to current pregnancy diagnose or other solutions, divulgation, translation, and this bridging between science and culture. So we figure out to propose this kit that is translatable, printable, updatable, transportable, and ultra low cost, which is this. And Paula, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
So our specific approach in this project is this kit. We would be creating a comic book, and we would include tools in it, such as pregnancy test strips, ovulation test strips, and a calendar for vaginal fluid tracking and information about other tracking methods. We realized that even though we're able to figure out a completely DIY pregnancy test, this wouldn't solve the issue itself. I mean, it would solve just a part for some women. We also identified that pre-existing designs are made up for they offer these kind of diagnostic solutions, but this is a tracking issue. So in addition to these comics book, we're working on designing a setup of minimal toolbox for you to work on your own pregnancy detection tests, BIOE, curiosity-driven science, and it represents an open window to become a co-researcher into pregnancy tests exploration. We would also include a web page where all materials would be translated into different languages and downloadable, so everyone can print it.
And this is the ultra low res prototype design of the bag, where the strips would be on the comic book, on the printed version of it. And we're thinking that this huge bag can emulate the bag where a single strip comes from, because when you produce this on a mass scale, it can reduce its cost like a lot. One of the strips costs like $0.04, which I have no idea how much that is in pesos, but it's really, 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 really cheap. And this is our future plans.
About the test strips cost, just by looking at the costs of these ovulation test strips, we can start to notice that these brands of, for example, Clear Blue, they really don't understand that this is a tracking issue, not a diagnosis issue. So, well, moving on to onto the gaps we have to fill still. Here are some of them, which we first need to define the design of the comic itself, its illustrations, We need to identify local networks for the comic to be distributed. We need scientific commitment for the questions we are presenting here in the uncertainty map to be answered and constantly updated in order to bring these answers to whoever is looking for them through the comic. And we want to make the basic toolbox that comes included with the kit for women to keep on working on their own pregnancy tests.
And this is our team. We're already on the Notion page if you want to contact us. And well, we want to thank especially to Dr. Manu and Madhu. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So I have hundreds of comments, but I think we'll have to take all of them offline. Just an absolutely stunning overview of a type of a solution that can only come through just being passionate about that. Absolutely fantastic. I think one quick comment I was going to make related to this is the history of pregnancy test exactly started around the kinds of ideas that you are exploring. And so there's a very, when I hear this, I'm hearing literally what happened in the past, because there were underground secret distribution centers for these frog eggs, because they were the most reliable technology. And still today, most of these frogs essentially are as good as any test that has ever been made.
I know, we actually, just quick, because I didn't mention it, like part of the solution for the back is because we thought of distribution of this as for like LSD distribution. I mean, it's like as cheap as that you can just prepare paper to tell you something.
And I think what I love is if it's the test is included in a comic book, it completely changes a person's approach in when you are picking it up, you know, in a pharmacy, which is where this origin story for this project started. Okay, lots to talk about. Let's move to the, I think, 2 more talks. Team AltPack. And again, you can see just the amount of talent, especially the graphics. There's lots to discuss in sharing talent amongst teams as well.
Yeah, you definitely won't be seeing as beautiful graphics as that in AltPacks right now. Tyler, do you have the presentation ready? I know on the forum I opted for you to do it, but I have it too if necessary.
Whichever one you would prefer.
Jacob, you should just share it because you can then drive it yourself.
Okay, so let me get this ready then. Share screen. Perfect. All right. Is that visible to everyone? And I imagine I can be heard because I've gotten a response. Awesome.
Looks good.
All right, so I'm Jacob, and throughout this really amazing journey, I've been working on a project that's evolved in name, but we're now at Proper Plotter, mainly with Rishi and Manraj, and they've really been fantastic teammates. So I'm gonna get into a little bit about what we've been doing. So here's a little bit of a timeline, compliments of Manraj, and really there was a real evolution of this project that I'm very proud of, even more so than kind of where we've gotten. And what happened is that when those idea boards were going up, I was all over the place. I had a few different ones I really liked. And then when we got into that paper applications lecture, and we talked about the paper diagnostics with the pregnancy tests and the malaria RDTs, and I realized that the packaging is plastic. And then that's really like the spark that set everything on fire for us. And we had then one for doing new packaging for those. And then there were a bunch, there was one that I was not originally a part of, but it was the onion peel. And that's the one that really, it stuck because it's so impactful. You hear that and it just sparks a lot of curiosity. And then there was another with chitin bioplastics. And we really merged people from all 3 of those idea boards to get into a place where, okay, now let's try and form a product with it. And really we were thinking about making a new diagnostic test, but we faced a lot of problems in the sense of just, you have to deal with a whole regulatory body when you want to change one of these diagnostics, because if you change the packaging, you can change the entire accuracy and reproducibility. And for that reason, we tried to shift. But the real thing we wanted was just, you know, there's liquid passage, and that's why you use plastic. So then we moved towards AltPack, where we were trying to deal with creating hydrophobic packaging for liquids like detergent or pen ink. And we moved from there too, just because in our homes, it's very difficult without a lab or anything like that to really construct any product or to test it. And we got to a point where we wanted to make DIY instructions for how to maybe build something like this at your house using, there's a big component of just like regional availability of different materials, because obviously plastic is universally available, but when you're looking at water lily or onion peel or palm frond, there's definitely regional varieties and availability. And the biggest restriction throughout that whole process was just, what do we use? There were so many different options and we had no idea where to go. And that's how we got to where we are now with Proper Plotter. We're now really looking to solve the problem that we faced all throughout, which was, how do we choose the best material for our specific solution area? And Proper Plotter is a name that comes from the fact that we want to plot material properties properly. We're going to aggregate bioplastics and biomaterials data so that people can compare it against each other in interactive plots and really make it happen so that people can understand it and really enjoy it when they have to choose what material they're going to use for their project. So the current work has been just the beginnings of that. And at a very basic level, what we're doing is we're taking different research papers where a lot of different people, a lot of material scientists have already collected this data, and we're putting it all together. Because currently when it's in PDFs, very hard to compare against each other. And also there's a really big issue of just people looking at different properties, and then it becomes hard to compare. So we need to do not only stacking information on top of each other, but also across to fill in many differend parameters. And the way we want to deliver this information is in the form of an interactive web app that I've been constructing using a Django backend. But that's definitely still in the works and is currently only locally hosted. But I have a few pictures here so I can show you guys a little bit of what's going on. So here is really, you know, all we're doing is trying to find the different data from the different sources. We organized it just inside a Google Sheet here, where we could all enter it together and interactively. And really, we're hoping to set something similar to like a Google Sheet up that's actually on the website where you can do forms and verify it. That stuff has not been realized yet, but you'll see that when you look at the actual website shell that we've got right here, you know, we're looking at materials, density, and all these different material properties. And then we also want to list like our most promising alternative materials along with traditional materials so people can really see all of it, plus the sources at the bottom. So again, very basic shell for what we're going to do. We're going to set up a user system. There's going to be another column that's going to be all the different people that have contributed to it to really incentivize and spark pride in those who are able to contribute. And then here is just something that's very, the beginnings of what we really hope it to be. Right now, it's just a table, but we want it to be where you can select a few different materials and it'll plot them for you with pictures. Obviously, I kind of manually did this myself through coding it out, but as you can see, 3 different points, you can see, okay, plastic is better than both palm frond and onion peel on a thermal conductivity basis. However, onion peel goes a little further than plastic in terms of density. And you know, the mission is just making it easier for people to choose a material. You know, they've got to defend it to whoever's supervising them. Why are you choosing this strange thing when you can just use plastic? And when you give them the numbers and a picture just to easily show it, that really makes it easy to make a change that's going to help the environment and the world. So these were just a few of the pictures, and here's the future aspiration. So we want to continue building onto this database. So far, we've really focused on extending it in terms of adding more materials, but it's very important. And our mentor has even told us, you know, there are more properties that are very important. So we want to extend it horizontally as well and getting that information. And the goal is, okay, take it from the research papers, have different people testing in their labs, put it all into the database, and then get it into this very interactive format where you can click around and you can see things and just make it like a fun exploratory experience. But evidently there's a lot of technology that needs to go into that. And I'll talk about that in just one more slide. but we're really looking to provide this to people like ourselves, right? Developing projects, needing to do this, but as well to industry and academia. We feel like it could be a really useful place for there to be interplay, right? Lots of different people send in information, and then everyone can access that universal body of information. And definitely keeping it open in terms of innovation and contributions. And then right here, so at this heart, this is a collection project, which means it's very community driven. So we need something that, well, what we really need is continued integration and interaction from the Frugal science and larger community. And that would be mainly, so far everything is based on research papers, but we hope to have material scientists taking a little bit of time in their lab just to check out a few of these materials that they have available to them and sending in that information. But we really think that, just like us, nobody on the team right now is a material scientist. All we've done is gotten passionate about a problem, went out, looked for the information, and brought it in. So we think that anyone here who's interested in something like this really wants to help move against plastic. And I know that there are teams like the Sustainable PPE and Rethink Plastic who are probably going to investigate their own. And we really look forward to maybe collaborating and speaking about the different data that you're able to collect and that we can provide you with. And just anyone who's willing to go out there, and nobody could have given a better example. I have to really thank Tyler and Isaac Larkin, who earlier today were talking about the lotus silk. And Tyler sent it out. It was interesting. Isaac found the paper. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make that interplay something super easy. And for now, since the website isn't live, I would just ask that if you could send it to me or any of the team members on Discord, or our Notion page is obviously available on the list of all the Notion pages. We'd be really happy to get it in that form, but eventually it's going to be easy. You just visit the website and do that. And part of that will be hopefully team expansion. We would really like I said before, none of us are material scientists. If there are any material scientists out there that really think that this is something interesting, we would love to have you on the team, have your expertise, and also a front-end designer. I'm very new to web development, so part of the project's expansion has been limited by my own learning and picking things up along the process. Anyone who has that kind of information and wants to help either as a team member or just someone to comment and advise would be really helpful. And I'd just like to thank Anton Molina. He's provided us a little bit of advice in terms of the material science side of things and really talked to us about different properties that we might want to expand into. But yeah, that's all I really have for you guys. This is Team Proper Plotter, and we really hope that I've kept you guys engaged and that you will engage with us in the future.
That's fantastic, Jacob. And I think one of the things coming back again, this is exactly what I was talking about, is resource libraries. Every single designer in the world, plastic is really a design flaw. And every single designer would value a resource like this. And I think just in general, the quickest way to just do that, independent of a front end, is just have an open Google Sheet that's accessible to everybody in the lab. And I can already see Corinne could put 20, 30 materials that she's been playing with for the last couple of years right away. It really is about, and then there is a post analysis and then one person that's checking in that. It is about building the database. So let's just first build the database in a central place. And then once the database is there, it's much, much easier to do all the front end stuff comes much later.
Okay, I definitely appreciate that. And there's actually one other thing I remember I wanted to say. For now, we have the missing values with this none yet found. I really would appreciate community feedback on what's a really enticing word to get people. I thought about including that yet as something to encourage people, but
we will give people cookie points. On the website, you get a star, you get a blue sticker if you have ever contributed an actual data point. If you've contributed a material, you get a gold star. And I mean, all of that has been figured out in gamification to really make people engaged. And again, community trust is important. So eventually people can then query the person who had proposed that material, share examples of products that have been made with that material. I mean, this thing can explode. If we do this right, this is going to be an incredible space. Okay, let's do one last.
Go ahead, Harish. Yes. So yeah, to address that, I think apart from material scientist, the missing entity is also a product designer or product designer team that can actually quickly come in and say, okay, this is what plastic brings into the table, and then we can match property for property and see who meets and beats and wins. And at the end of the day, the war is really at the property level in that sense.
Yeah, I think I'll mention this literally with what's happening. We're developing a large-scale COVID diagnostic test, and we are going through hundreds of plastics right now, looking for materials. If we had a database like this, immediately it can be used today. And so one of the factors there is that it's very standardized. And we can bring in the plastics world, people have standardized it because they want to sell their materials. So we're going to use their same resources and we will flip that around to say, look, this is how you search for plastic. Here are the alternatives. And it's a competitive, it's a very tough.
Azu, don't get too dramatic with us, okay? Don't go in outbursts of crying and laughing within the...
Nish, you're audible. Okay, but we saw Nish playing with his son. Okay, back to the last talk, science education for all.
Let me stop sharing. Yeah.
That was a fun moment, Nish. At some point of time, you have to show your son to everybody at some point. Do we know who is presenting on the science education for all?
I think Flor is up.
Flor.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, okay. So I am presenting for all my team. We are Science Education for All. And so the idea is to make a prototype accessible for all. Have you seen another? Oh, here it is.
Yeah, present is all the way on the top right corner.
Yes. So I think it's better this way because my computer is crazy.
We can see the screen that says where the idea begins.
Yes. Okay. So the idea begins because I live in Oaxaca and has 570 municipalities, and we have more than 11 recognized languages and more than 20 regional variation of languages. And in Mexico, we have like the SEP, which is the Secretary Public of Education, and this institution provides us of elementary and middle school free textbooks. However, not all these communities have access to these textbooks, and when they have, the majority are on Spanish, making it more difficult for native speaking communities to access for all education. The access to these communities are really difficult because some of them, they haven't roads built, and also we live in a earthquake zone, so the community is really difficult to access. The school level is low, principally in girls, so not there. When they are teachers, they are not available to speak all these languages. Of course, the migration is one of the things like that really happened. And of course, the pandemic has shown more the social and education difference. Oaxaca is not the only place in the world who has this condition, of course. And so the problem statement is, how can we explain to the children of people who don't have access to any sources of what is happening in this moment around the world? And we all know say that there's a lot of different ways of learning. There's not only one way. So our main goal was to build a prototype, a mix from a ViewMaster and a Google Cardboard lenses. The design will be allowed to see all aside between of them. Most have like material accessible, and it should not be complex to perform. Things to have in consideration, we are using only drawings to the person will can write and their own language. We can discuss maybe some terms which are should not change a lot, like for example SARS-CoV-2, and all the information we provide has to be accessible for children, so we can make sure everybody can understand, because sometimes we as scientists, we are really technicians, and that maybe will be difficult for all the people. So for the ViewMaster is a model to reference and has to be cheap, easy to make, so people can make it. And so here is the first prototype. The idea was to everybody in their own houses can be replying this prototype. The problem with this prototype has like the lenses, and not all this community has to access to this, and has to be really, really cheap. So for the final model until this moment is that we need scissors, pencils, rulers, an acetate sheet. With one acetate sheet, we can share for more than 4 people, and it's not necessary. You can cut a bottle of water or any transparent material, a paperboard, cardboard, shoebox, or any material that had to be performant. A hard strap can be replaceable with a popsicles, white sheets, 2-cup bottles, and here's the final prototype. All of the measurements are available in our Notion page. In the side, in the about, we have a sign tune, really, really easy to see. And as you can see, it's really a basic model. And between the model, you can watch.
So Flora, you could talk while this is happening. So how are you moving the paper? Is there a knob that
Yeah.
you're doing? Yeah.
So as you can see, there's 2 hard straps above the box, and the children or the people who is moving, they only roll the paper and they can watch all the side tune. So the idea is, although this model is very basic, it allows children or people get involved to unhook, to create them, and the project making by their own. So the content can be modified so the person in charge can take reference from their environment, like trees, animals for around. And the idea is to make a free website when free resource. So we are only starting with the SARS-CoV-2, but the idea is to expose to more material. So for example, what is a cell or how vaccines works, and is to increase the content and have available and be the access for everyone, whether there are teachers or only parents who are already acquainted their own children. It's a local solution, but become something like available worldwide. And we have like the Notion page. I'm really thankful for all you guys. This is an amazing community. Thank you to Tyler, Manu, and my little sister who works like a model, and of course my team. And we made a Gmail, so if you have any idea, please send us. And we are in the Notion, like for comments and suggestions. So thank you so much.
That was absolutely beautiful, Flor. What I love about this is that once the platform is built, any graphic designer in the world can make some sketch, post them online. Anybody else can download that content, just like you download electronic content, but physical content. just absolutely fantastic. I'm already seeing it's 1:57. I had a huge plan for discussions and stuff. I think we'll have to move it to another one more lecture, unfortunately. And I know this one everybody will want to attend because I have a carrot in the end, which is about how to move forward. I think it makes sense to have that discussion with time. I just want to end this this specific current lecture, just absolutely mind-blowing work. And of course, this is why this is not just a class. There is so much to do. So I'm going to propose, and since it's Thanksgiving, my proposal would be Tuesday next week is when we would have the discussion class, and we will plan. If you have very specific questions, send them to me, and I'll put together a FAQ associated with this, because it will give me the repository of questions that are all going through your minds. You can send them to me as a private message as well. I'll collect them all together. Some of them might be a little more sensitive because you're thinking about what to do next. Others might be that they're completely open. I'll try to use them as a guidebook for what I have in mind for what comes next.
So we can create, maybe I can create a Discord for just general discussion of that if you have public questions that you want to ask sort of everyone in the community. And of course, yeah, if you do have things that are more individual, you can feel free to do that by private message.
Yeah, and I think the idea would be one of the threads is most of the common things would cover, and then we would have, I want to lay out a plan for what we want to do next, and then the rest of the Tuesday talk will be really focused on the discussion itself. Because of course, one of the important aspects is what you can all see and realize is we have seeds of just a phenomenal groups of ideas. But eventually what truly matters, I mean, we can all pat ourselves on the back. What would matter is when these resources are widely available to everyone, and there is a huge distance to go. I think this is always the classic challenge that, of course, it takes this much time to pinpoint what we want to do. That has happened at this point, but there is still a long way to go. And it would be very valuable to structure and be really focused on these projects, because otherwise they'll remain as ideas. You know, good ideas are around. That's only half the challenge. You know, scaling these is what the real deal is. So in fact, in some sense, the harder part comes now, but at least, you know, now we're all charged up. So on that note, I'll see you all on Tuesday. Happy Thanksgiving for some of you who are celebrating. Look at the history of this holiday as well while you're doing this. Please be safe. The pandemic is out of control, at least on our end, but I heard some good news on the political side. So maybe life might return back. On that note, bye everyone. We will see you on Tuesday.
Thanks everyone.